What's going on, guys? Let's give a huge shout out to Editor X for sponsoring this video, and let's jump in. So one of the things that I like doing when I start working on a new project is I typically hide all the sections on the page, and that way I can focus just on one particular section. This little quick tip will also help you work a little bit faster when you have a very large page. In our tablet mode, you can see our sign up button is on top of our hamburger menu. I'm going to select the menu, and then I'm going to change the color so that we can actually see it. You're going to see that in our layers panel, I've selected the hamburger menu, and you have a floating menu that you can play with. You can access additional hamburger menus using the add panel. So you see here, you have all these types that you can choose from. And what we're gonna do is we can open up the menu. And what this does is just, it triggers an interaction, and we have additional information in our layers panel. Right here, we can start customizing some of these elements. For example, the background, let's go ahead and change that to our primary green. And for our vertical menu, we can start increasing the font size. All right, so let's go ahead and select our heading 6. This size looks pretty good. And one thing you'll notice in our attributes panel is we have a spacing one for our menu. We can space out all these elements vertically, and you can use the pixel value. We can offset and even have a sub-menu offset. But because we don't have any sub-menu items, we don't need to worry about it. All right, so let's go ahead and close this, and going back to our sign up button, we can align it just a little bit to the right. We make sure that everything looks good on this view. So it looks like the title and subtitle look pretty good. From here, we're gonna start seeing things break apart. All we have to do is make sure that we start using these side handlebars to make sure that there's no additional breakpoints that we might need in order for us to make this design look good. For example, you can see here on the mobile breakpoint, the sign up is actually using the percentage value on the margin right. So let's swap that out to a pixel value instead, maybe give it 100 pixels. There we go. This way we have a nice spacing between both the tablet and mobile. Notice how it cascaded that effect down to the mobile breakpoint. For the logo, we're going to change that to 75 pixels. And again, for the title, now we can start experiment with the font size. For the purpose of this demo, I'm not actually using the font scale. I'm just using a fixed font size. It just feels a little bit easier for me to have more control over. And again, we want to make sure we give that 100% to the sub-headline so that it stretches out as much as it can. If we select our section, or hero section, we can see how it's using 100 VH to expand all the way down. Let's give that a maximum height. And we can adjust just a little bit more so that it's not so tight, just like that. You can see here also that the footer needs some work. So I'm gonna go ahead and quickly fix this. I think it just needs to be a smaller font size. There we go. Now, if I scale down, you're gonna notice that I removed the video from the mobile experience, and on desktop, we have that video pop back in. This is always good practice because on mobile devices, some browsers don't support autoplay. So let's go ahead and move over to our overview page. We want to make sure that everything starts to look good on different breakpoints, making sure that the title is readable. We want to make the focal point change just a little bit. These logos within a grid, let's move them out of that top area. Not much needed to do here. Maybe we can expand this text and maybe decrease the font size. Our offset looks pretty good, and it doesn't seem to need any changes. So let's keep moving forward. Here we can start changing a little bit of the size of these floating VR headsets. We can always reset the image from the cogwheel. There's a reset image button that will help us get this to where we need it. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and skip through a lot of this work because it's just basically moving things around in our canvas. Changing the font size, adjusting a little bit of how we want this to look on tablet mode. What I really love about Editor X is everything is so visual. Like, we don't have to worry about weird CSS code or anything like that. It's just moving things in your canvas like you would do it on any other design tool. So you can see here we have this beautiful layout. We can move now towards our mobile breakpoint. Again, just changing the focus on those images, changing the font size, and adjusting the width. Basically, this is pretty much what you really have to do when you're working for responsive behavior. You're just adapting and changing things, and just make sure that whenever you're doing that, you're not moving things or objects out of their parent containers, because that would be reparenting. We don't want these elements to break apart when we go back into our tablet or desktop mode. All right, check this out. This looks really good. This is the mobile breakpoint for our products and everything looks pretty good. One thing before I forget is the overview has that cool transparent video. So we want to make sure that this transparent object is visible and it works well on other breakpoints too. Let's go ahead and do that. The first thing is just make sure you select the container and just start playing with the size, the width, the height, the margins. Make sure you align it in a way that it doesn't affect or hide any other element. For example, here, I'm just going to make this taller, this little section taller, so that we can have a little bit more room for that text. We can also offset that so that we can make that nice readable text before you get into the rest of the section. One thing to notice is that on mobile breakpoints, overlapping elements, like in this case, the VR products, we need to start resizing and rescaling them so that they don't overflow. And we don't want to hide the overflow in this case, because then it would hide them from going from one section and another section. What I'm gonna do is I'm just going to adjust this so that our mobile breakpoint allows enough space. So maybe just rescaling them, removing the rotation. And you can see if I scroll to the right, there's this little gap that's happening. And that's because some of the elements are still overlapping or overflowing our design. Again, just rescale them. Everything is visual, so just make sure that you're designing everything like you would design it in any other tools. One thing I'm noticing is this sign up button doesn't fit very well. It seems crowded. Let's just go ahead and hide it on the mobile breakpoint. Let's go ahead and test this out. Yeah, this looks really good. Our mobile menu works great. But again, this is an iterative process. You need to start testing it out. You need to make sure that everything looks good. That's what I love about this, because you can actually design it here, not having to worry about creating multiple breakpoints in a different design tool. You're literally doing everything right here. Within our features, layouter or grid, we can start playing around with the font scale to go from 30 to 50. Another cool thing is the idea of using grids to transform or rearrange our information. So for example, here we have that image being on top. But what I like to do is, really I want to have these titles to be on top of that image, but just on the mobile breakpoint. Well, remember, this is a grid system, so we want to make sure we go into the grid, then edit grid. And on the first row, we can actually delete it. Now, what's going to happen is both the image and the title are both within that grid area. So here, if I stretch this image out, it's going to be part of the grid area from 1 to 2, which is what you can see here. Because they're both in the same area, we can start playing with the title, font size, and colors just so that we have a completely different design in this breakpoint. You'll notice that the image has expanded all the way. So if we adjust the grid and go ahead and change the row height to 1 fraction, I'm just playing around with the layout. Again, this totally looks different from our desktop view, but that's the whole point, right? We're trying to make something exciting and different. And if we take a look at our layouter section, and it's just a matter again of adjusting the padding, adjusting the spacing, and the size of these font size. For example, here, I think this is a good spot where we can use this scalable font. So it goes from 25 to 70. And then again, we want to make sure that everything looks good, both on desktop and tablet. So you always want to test out by resizing these handlebars. And remember, one of the cool things about Editor X is if you're zoning out and putting all these different sizes and they don't come back to tablet mode, you can always select the shape and then copy from a breakpoint, choose the breakpoint you want, and then apply to the current breakpoint. Now, layouters are doing a lot of the heavy lifting for you. As you scale it down to a mobile breakpoint, it goes from mosaic view into a stacking view. This is starting to look really nice, guys. And could you imagine how long this lesson would be if I went step by step? Alright, so for the movies and games, this was a slider, and so there's really not much to do here. We have that nice header, we can adjust the font size, make sure that it looks good. And then for the actual slider, just making sure that it's 100% of whatever our viewport is. I think this is just pretty basic stuff. We want to make sure to look at the settings, and the reason why is because as we scroll through, notice that it just lands in the middle. What I'd love to do is that it snaps in the middle instead. We can select the repeater, and then under change layout, there's a toggle for scroll snap. You turn that on, and that's it. Let's go ahead and preview, and then you can see how as you scroll, it automatically snaps to that item. To finalize, our pricing is all about alignment of elements and size. For example, our mobile breakpoint needs a little bit of work and a little bit of love. I just went ahead and started rearranging things, and also for the sign up, we just needed to make that logo a little bit smaller and some of the text a little bit smaller as well. Alright guys, that's pretty much it for this lesson. I'm super excited to see what you guys come up with. This was a pretty long lesson, but it was mostly for me to give you a sense of me tackling these issues of breakpoints and responsiveness. You've got to make sure you test everything out, not just on your browser. Try running it through Chrome Inspector. I'm pretty confident you've got enough information here in this video alone to start going out there and building out amazing responsive websites.